Welcome to Europe in an Italian Minute. Today we're going to talk about Italian regions and Italian regions in Europe and Italian regions obviously within the context of regional diversity and regional differentiation within Italy. Now, just a little background here. As you may know historically about some Italian regions, Tuscany and Toscana, and Campania around Naples. But the Italian state has been organized since 1948 into 20 regions. Now, 15 of these are what we call ordinary regions. That is that they are essentially part of a unitary, centralized Italian state. And we've had some reforms recently, which I'll mention in a second. And we have 5 other regions that have always been considered special regions for particular characteristics that they might have. For instance, the 2 big islands, Sardinia and Sicily, have had a special status in the Italian constitution because they're islands and they have a particular history. Then we have other regions like Friuli, Venezia Giulia, Val d'Aosta, and where I'm speaking to you right now from Trentino Alto Adige, that have had particular linguistic and cultural communities that have given them a special status. And these special regions have had particular powers given to them, and essentially what it means for most cases, as we have here in Trentino Alto Adige, that they've kept most of the tax money that's generated, or the tax money that they generate has been returned to the regions. But for the most part, we have 15 regions that are part of a unitary state. Now, Italy in no way approaches a federal structure, even though regions have been given greater powers. Essentially, the powers they've been given to is to administer programs such as healthcare. Now, Italian regions roughly spend about 150 billion euros a year. 110 billion of this goes to healthcare. Now, why are these figures important? Well, historically, Italian unification has been a disjointed and in many ways incomplete process. The regional diversities in terms of per capita income are quite stark, and the original reason for why we had structural funds and cohesion funds in the European Union was precisely because of countries like Italy that had this large regional diversity in terms of its GDP, that we didn't want to create peripheries within the periphery of the European Union, and that we didn't want states to interfere and intervene with their own regional development funds. Now, this brings us to the question of how do Italian regions fare within the European Union? Now, clearly, the north-south divide in Italy persists and in many ways has gotten wider. Per capita incomes have done better in southern Italy in absolute terms, but in relative terms, the economic performance between the two has remained at what it's always been for the past 150 years or so, and perhaps maybe in some ways has grown. But within that, of course, we know that there's some regions in southern Italy that are doing better than others. Puglia is probably doing better than Calabria and Sicilia. They also don't perform as well with respect to being able to access the structural funds. We have some regions, such as Calabria and Sicilia, that were only able to access less than a third, or in Calabria's case, only 23% of the regional funds that were of the structural funds that were allocated to them in the 2007-2013 period. Now, why is this so? Why do we have some regions that aren't even able to access those regional development funds? Partly it has to do with administrative problems at both the central level and at the regional level. And this really touches upon the question of we have problems of developing an administrative and a political class at the regional level that's disjointed. We don't have the great tradition of les grandes écoles in France that could train an administrative class that then can be sent to the regions and govern and manage in a uniform kind of way. A second reason has to do with perhaps the fact that the projects and the proposals to access those funds coming from the regions have been poorly prepared, again reflecting the fact that there might not be an administrative class that really understands how to present a proposal to access funds. The third reason is again reflecting the poor administrative classes. These projects have been disjointed, have been fragmented. There isn't a strategy behind how to access funds. What are the key strategic development points that we want for a region? Do we want to create a Silicon Valley, I don't know, in Basilicata? What do we need to do? What kind of infrastructure do we need? That kind of planning on a broad scale just hasn't happened. So what does this mean for Europe, Italy, and Italian regions? Well, one of the consequences of perhaps a growing regional divide is that we might see continuing a part of Italy, especially in northern Italy and in central Italy, that really is anchored northwards. And it looks to its economic future and its economic destiny with the rest of Europe. And then you have another part of Italy that is struggling to catch up, not just with Europe, but just struggling to catch up with what is the rest of the country. And this could have lots of consequences. It has lots of consequences internally because it could mean that the regions in the north increasingly see as the south as a burden. That's not good news for Italy, and it's not good news for the European Union. And the final point is that the regions really, and the regional differentiation highlights the importance that we have to political governance and the performance of the political and administrative class in a unified Europe and under a single currency. You need to have a political class and a managing class that can exploit the opportunities presented by Europe. Otherwise, you get into a vicious circle and into a downwards spiral, which has lots of negative consequences for European integration. Grazie.